You're listening to Mentoring Developers. You want to hire people but what kind of people would you hire? I don't want to put words into your mouth, so I want you to say it.
Yeah, we've actually talked about this earlier, but one of the, I think the critical parts is when you do hiring, as I've often talked about the fact is, you just have a lot of bias anytime you meet any individual, but especially within a working situation, is that I really just have two metrics, is that can this person do this job? And second, are they a complete psychopath? Right. So the notion is that everything else is really bias. It's like, oh, I think this person's funny or smart or interesting or whatever. That's just me personally. And I know myself enough to know that no company should trust necessarily what my personal beliefs are. So the notion is like, if you can hire people that are good and that generally, I jokingly say psychopath, but we've all worked with people, that just sometimes have a difficult time working with other folks. Is that you just want to be empathetic of your colleagues, treat them with respect. If they can do the job, there's probably a pretty good chance things will end up working out in the end.
I want to say one thing to that. Like, what do you think, guys, when a lot of companies, when they try to hire someone, they focus a lot like on the skills and don't focus like if this is actually a person good for the team, right? Because from my experience, sometimes people will like give you, for example, tests that you have to like finish, online tests where they give you like a score at the end, like 22% or 25% of whatever, right? And I encounter companies that went and said, oh, you just got 20%, we cannot hire you, right? But for example, that test was built in a way so the test code was able to actually test what you wrote, right? And so you could like write the worst code ever, but still the test code passed because of like whatever reason, right? And they will go and say like, oh, awesome job, you're hired, right? So what do you think about those situations?
I think that I have opinions on this matter, and I think Ed might have something to say about that as well. Let me just say what I think in this about these testing, these kind of standardized testing, automated testing suites, and these just ideas that you want to get the best of the best, and you don't want to look at all the resumes, and you don't really want to consider everybody, so you want to whittle down the list to the top 5%. And how do you do that? There's an automated way. Let them do this test, and as you're saying, automated tests are run, and humans are not involved, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden now that's our criteria for selecting people. It's just a way of not having to look at everybody. It's just us being lazy or us not having enough time or caring enough about building a great team or hiring great people to actually go through people's profiles and looking at a broader spectrum of people and not depending on one thing or the other. And sometimes it's not the online test thing. Sometimes it's an in-person test. You go to the company and they give you these arbitrary exams. It's like a thing that you have to do, and somehow it's an objective way of finding out who's the best, but that's actually not true. Most of the testing and most of the interviews and all of the stuff that goes into our technical interviews, most of the stuff that we do is not really, really related to the work people do, and it doesn't really test the interpersonal skills and communication, none of that.
Right. So what do you think, guys, it's like a good criteria? Because, for example, I remember one situation, like when I was hiring at a game developer company, and this guy, so I was always like, it was me, and I was like responsible to checking if the person is like, does it behave the right way? More like, what's in this person's head, right? And then I had my good friend, which actually was testing his skills of the person. And so, but always also like he was like very interested in people that like fit very well in the company culture, right? And so I remember this guy came and he was like off the chain. Like this guy was like the skill level that he had were on point because he wrote his own 3D engine for his own game in like 4 months. And when he showed us all the feature of this engine, it was like, it was basically incredible, right? But then my friend asked him like, okay, so which part of this engine are you like most proud of, right? And he's like, well, I don't know. It's like, code. It's like, who cares, right? It's like, okay, fine. So how can you like explain like this object, or like why did you design this object in this way, right? And so he said, well, because that's the only way. And so his answer were like very like, I almost like as if he's like too smart for the average person, right? Like he doesn't compute that someone else doesn't understand, like, well, this is the only way you do stuff, right? And so having, for example, someone like that in the team, it will like actually make it worse, because like he will not be able to share his knowledge with other people, right? Because in his mind it's like, well, of course you do it that way because that's the only way, right? So that's for, at least for like, was our criteria, like, okay, super, that's great that you have skills, but you need to actually be able to communicate with other people, right?
Yeah, and you don't want any rock stars. I'm not really I'm not a big fan of rock stars, because
what do you mean by rock star?
Rock star developers, I guess I should qualify that. A rock star developer will come with his groupies and his attitude and all the stuff that goes with rock stars, late night parties. And rock stars are not people that I would put up as role models.
Gotcha.
So a rock star developer is a term I get a lot, and people throw it around a lot. And it just rubs me the wrong way.
Guys, I also wonder too, is it's like some of what we're talking about is ultimately it's like just the way the team is managed. Because to your point, it's not antithetical to your thing. But I've worked with some folks who you could probably consider kind of like rock star people in their particular aptitudes. But it's like, I think you take, and this may be a little pedantic, but it's like you take that same person and move them in one organization, they'll be successful in another, and they won't. And it's like, and even though this may sound like it's a little bit of a an exact way of kind of approaching it is that, like, I've often thought about like kind of this management structure is that, you have people that have like an aptitude, like say, for instance, a rock star developer, do they have appropriate amount of aptitude, and like, do they have the authority to be able to exercise that? Like, can they actually do the stuff that they know? But then in the third, and this sounds like such a corporate BS HR term, but it's like, are they accountable for it? And I think what we're talking about is saying like, well, you take somebody who's really, really good at something and has the ability to do it, having authority. But if they're not accountable, I think maybe it's a little bit maybe towards what David was saying. Like, if they believe like that's the only way of doing it, right, and nobody's ever going to call them on that, well, then that's going to be a problem, But if they're being managed appropriately and saying, hey, you know what, that's a little bit of like having blinders on, and there's many ways of being able to tackle this. As long as that person can't exercise that, that prerogative on the rest of the team, well, then that's fine. It's like that person will just simply learn. But
I don't have any issues. Like if someone like is super, it's awesome, but also he knows how to like share his knowledge and how to talk with people that have less knowledge, right?
Oh, very good point.
Because he goes, if there's, for example, always like try to have friends that know more than me, because I know that I can learn from them and they have no issue like sitting down with me and explaining something, right? So if there's a person that also understands the same thing and say like, oh, I see that you're building, I don't know, an object in the wrong way, and I can show you and actually I'll like give you like good examples why this way is better, then that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, certainly.
Okay, so now we have a way of hiring people. We want to make sure people can communicate, people can get along, and all this. It's just standard, we want good people in our team that contribute to the team spirit. Thank you so much for listening.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.